Hello, my friends. Hello, my life warriors, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Day In, Day Out podcast. Woo! Today on episode 227, I was very lucky to have, Karen Gershowitz on the podcast. She is a travel writer, travel author, business consultant. We talked about a number of things on the podcast today. How she got the travel bug, basically leaving New York in the early 70s, coming over to good old London, where she first she went to Holland, then she came to London, where she basically ended up staying here for 3 years as a student, doing ceramics of all things. We talked about how she basically continued her traveling throughout time. What decade was the sort of golden, like how she saw the best time for her travels? And how she earned her, 2 million miles of traveling, air traveling. That is amazing. I've got to say, her new book, Travel Mania, Stories of the Wanderlust. I haven't read it myself, but she is promoting her book as well. So please take a moment for this podcast, have a listen, and tell a friend, have a cup of tea, and enjoy. Anyway, bye-bye for now. Yeah, peace. Whoa. Hello, my friends. Hello, my life warriors, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Day In, Day Out podcast. Woo! Today on episode, oh my Lord, 227. I'm very lucky, privileged to have Karen Gershowitz on the podcast today. Now, now this is the thing. She is a travel writer, travel author, business consultant, and she's most probably been to more countries than you could shake a stick at. How are you today, my lady?
I'm doing really well. It's a gorgeous sunny day. I'm in New York and a little cold, but other than that, perfect day. And we've had a string of gray, horrible days. So I'm happy.
Yeah, you say New York. Like New York to me was always a sunny city. Summertime, because I worked over in upstate New York for an organization called the Fresh Air Fund. I don't know.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
So
I know it well. I
Hey,
know it well.
how come? Oh, how comes you know the Fresh Air Fund so well?
Oh, they're a great organization. They send kids up to camp.
Yeah.
And they're very, very well known in New York City. And I've contributed to them over the years because they're a great organization.
There you go. There you go. I was a camp counselor in Camp Hayden Marks for 4 summers. And wait, 4 summers? Yeah, 4 summers. And I was a village leader in my 4th summer. And so this New York has always been a hot city until I came over in 2007. Because my brother from another mother had his first kid. It was February, and it was America always gets me like this, because first time I ever went to the States, I was like, sitting on the plane, it went, it's 85. And I was like, okay. I flew into Virginia and got off the plane, baked, literally. This time, I was like, it's going to be minus 15.
Froze.
Yeah, no, it was like, they were minus 15. I stepped out of my friend's apartment, walked out, bright sunny day. I was like, it's not that cold. Walking down the street like I owned the place, until I got to this street with shadow. And it was like, okay, stepped into that shadow. I felt everything regress into me. My hood came up, you saw only eyes. I was went from a bold stride to a shuffle of just sheer pain, because, oh my God. And then, I walked past a group of police officers, and all I could say to them was it's cold, isn't it? And they looked at me like, yeah. I was like, okay, but yes.
Well, the other thing, of course, is I live very close to the Hudson River. And every time the wind comes across, if you are standing in a cross street where the wind is going across, oh my, you could get blown away. So It's, it varies. I mean, it depends where you are in the city. I used to work many years ago down in Lower Manhattan. And it
Right.
was so cold and so windy, the water coming off the harbor, that literally there was like a fountain in front of my building. A woman got blown into it
Oh God.
from the wind. And after that, they put railings up and, but the wind was so strong, you had to kind of lean over to lean into the wind so that you wouldn't get knocked over.
Wow, that is mental. I've got to say, oh look, that is mental because look, honestly, like we had a couple of storms recently over this week. Well, not this week, over last month, and yeah, the winds were bad, and like yes, we've had some like extreme weather, but not like that.
Yeah, so when you have to lean into it to walk, that it's a really windy day.
Absolutely. But like this is the thing, you've been a lifelong New Yorker, is that correct?
Well, I've lived outside of New York, but I was born and raised in Manhattan. I live in Manhattan now. I've lived in upstate New York, but I've also lived in other places, but for shorter periods of time.
Okay, because like I am curious because look, for some like, okay, let's just say like your fellow Americans have been notoriously sort of shy of the whole, let me get a passport and leave America. Look, you've got an embarrassment of riches when it comes to sort of different climates, different places you can go. Look, like place what comes to mind, Cape Cod. Like, yes, I've got an interesting story about that place. But like Cape Cod all the way to like Florida, you've got like some fantastic places. If you're in California, you can you can ski in the morning and surf in the evening. Like, yes. So what made you I've been a New Yorker, like either in New York City or in New York State for the longest time, like, oh, hey, you know what? I'm out.
Okay. Well, here's the beginning of the story. So
Okay.
I am a baby boomer, and my year was the largest population year of all. And so I skipped 2 grades, not because I was so smart. I mean, I was smart, but not that smart. But they wanted me out of the school system. The faster they could get kids through, the happier they were. And I went to college. I didn't get into the college I wanted, not because they didn't think I would be a good student, but because I was too young to live in the dormitories.
Okay.
So I had to stay in New York. And I had this horrible commute going to college. I lasted 1 year. It was a horrible year. It was the late 60s. Things were crazy. The city was beginning to fall apart. And I just said, I got to get out of here. And I have to go I need to get far away from here. So I worked for a year, saved every penny I earned, and I do mean every penny I earned, and said, I'm off. I'm out of here. And it was very interesting because my mother, who always wanted to travel, said, great, go, and my father's going, I don't know about this. But I went. And I first went to the Netherlands. Why, you ask, would you go to the Netherlands? Good question. I wouldn't go there now first, but that was where I went because my parents had did business over there. And so they knew people. And I thought, okay, it'll be okay if I go over there. And I got accepted to the Koninklijke Academie der Beeldkunst, the Academy of Fine Arts in The Hague. I was an art student.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I lasted 3 months, I think. It was awful. On every level, it was awful. I had just come from a year of a school that was the most progressive, experimental, far out art school you could think of.
Mm-hmm.
And now I was sitting there drawing from plastic fruit. And I mean, it was like, no. So I left and I went to London. Just picked up and went to London. I fell into, and we were talking about where I lived, I fell into a place in Bayswater that was listed as a student hostel residence on Prince's Square. And I walked in, And it turns out it was like a dormitory for the University of London, because they also was height of the baby boom, didn't have enough housing for kids. So they said, go to these hotels. Well, the whole neighborhood was like being in a huge dorm. And I loved it. I immediately made friends the very first night. And someone said to me, well, you could go over to the Sir John Cass College of Art. I think they'd probably accept you. I said, really? So the next day, before I had seen anything, it was my first trip to London. I hadn't seen Tower of London. I hadn't seen Parliament. I hadn't seen anything. I went over and I registered. And the rest, as they say, is history. And I stayed for 3 years, mostly in Bayswater. And then I got a sublet in Bayswater and stayed there for the most of the time.
No, because like this is the thing, like when you're talking about the late 60s, like 70s. Now, here's the thing. When you hear New York, London, Paris, like throw Sydney in there for why not? For a giggle here and there. Now, everyone associates that with the era of glamour. But here's the thing. New York in the 70s and 80s, yeah, like it was kind of like the purge at some point.
It was horrible.
Yeah. And like this is the thing, London, okay, it wasn't so much purge like, but it was, how can I put it? Very much rough around the edges. Like, yes, if you wanted to sort of get world cuisine, London was not going to be the city for
Oh, no. No. You certainly didn't go there for food. God knows. Unless you really love Indian food, which I learned to love, I must say. But that was, cuisine, we go, but it was a really alive place, really, really alive. And the art school was really fun. It had a lot of foreign students, had a lot of British students. And the woman, I ended up, the only course I could take was ceramics. I had never taken ceramics in my life. And I ended up getting a bachelor's and a master's of fine arts in ceramics back in the US. So it kind of set me on this path, which I then abandoned as soon as I got the master's, I might add. But
okay.
Yeah.
You are like, I'm saying this with all due respect, but you turned out to be a little bit of a strange duck, I can tell.
You think?
Yeah, because like this is the thing, like, okay, I can only picture like London back then. It must have been like just on the tail end of the sort of hippie era, sort of going into the realms of disco. If I sort of get my eras right.
It was hippies. It was a lot of people who were, well, it was the Beatles, and it was, the Rolling Stones, and it was Mary Quant, and it was, all of this. There was a lot of stuff going on that was in the music world, in the art world, a lot of real craziness. It was like the first time, I think in London particularly, not so much in New York, that people got to really express themselves. And so they did. And there was some real craziness. I mean, just absolute craziness. Hairdos. I still remember guys gluing their hair, literally epoxying it into long spikes. And there was a big thing in the news. There was somebody who worked for some union. I don't know if it was the plumbers or something. And he came into work with these spikes because that was a fashion. And they hated to do it, but they had to defend him because the company wanted to fire him. It was all over the news, And of course, it was also, it was a little Margaret Thatcher. I mean, it was like craziness. It was a crazy time. But it was fun. It was really fun. And at that point, you could travel for next to nothing. And when I say next to nothing, I seriously mean, and I would hitchhike. I was very brave. I would just stick out my thumb and go. And so you wouldn't do that now, but then you could. And there were dirt cheap flights. I mean, like silly cheap flights. And I would fly over to Paris for a weekend. This was long before the Channel. Or, fly over to, I went to Rome, or Switzerland, or, wherever I could get a flight to that was really cheap. And I didn't have any particular schedule other than school. And I was working. I did get some part-time work, which is how I could afford all of this. And I got to see a lot of Europe, a lot of Europe. Sometimes friends would come with me. Sometimes I would go on my own. And I learned to love traveling by myself, which most people really dislike. I love it because you meet lots of people. You can tell I'm not exactly shy. I will go up to anyone and start a conversation, and pretty much all over the world, I might add, even if I don't speak the language. It's amazing what you can communicate. And so I just, it got me very brave. And then the year after I came back to the US, and I went to college in Kansas City, which was talk about cultural shock. Kansas City is dead center in the US. It is middle America. And I was like, what? But the school was great, really, really great. But the first summer I was there, I came back to Europe just to go visit people. And I was with a friend and we hitchhiked all over the continent. And then the next summer, I weaseled my way because I could not afford it, but I got the college to pay for me to go to Japan. And I spent 6 weeks in Japan, traveling around, going to see ceramic studios, and didn't speak a word of Japanese, nothing. And at that point, which was we're now in the, 1973, there were very, very few signs in English, even in Tokyo. And I managed to get around. And after that trip, I realized I could go anywhere. It didn't matter whether I spoke the language, whether I could read it or not, I could get around and manage. So I got very, very brave after that trip.
Yeah, because this is the thing, I will go down a certain path, but not right now. But the whole thing with regards to travel and, basically the world in general, it just seemed like, from how you're talking, it was a lot more easy, might not be the right word, but it seemed to be a little bit more freer, if you get what I mean. Sort of freedom of movement, basically you just showing up in the UK and going, you know what? I think they'll take you in this college.
You couldn't. I don't think you could do that now.
No, you can't do that.
I don't think you could do it.
Because this is the thing. By the time you're like, oh yeah, I want to go to this college, you got to then a visa, this, that, go jump through a whole heap of hoops.
Yeah.
And then and with the realm of sort of travel, travel, I think, has become in that realm of cheap again, but I don't think you're going to have the moniker of the jet set lifestyle, where it was sort of painted in that sort of, I think, air of glamour. I think it was most probably getting cheaper around about then. I'm not too sure. When was jet set lifestyle?
I would never call it glamorous. I was staying in youth hostels. I mean, I was, in a room with 6 people, sleeping in a bunk bed with a sleeping bag. This was not glamour. I was traveling on the absolute cheap. But I never felt any hesitancy about going anywhere. And I still don't. I mean, I will pick up and go almost anywhere. As long as there isn't a war going on, or there isn't, in COVID, I was not going anywhere, except locally. But, it's not in my nature to be afraid of going places. And I still just pick up and go. I don't even think twice about it. I just kind of oh, that sounds interesting. Let's go.
I'm curious, when you started this travel adventure back then, what was the sort of biggest, one of the biggest takeaways, or the most unusual place you went when you were back then, if you could throw your mind back?
Well, I know what the biggest takeaway is. I'm not sure I know what the most unusual place. I have to think about that one. But the biggest takeaway was, and I still believe it's true, it doesn't matter which culture you're in. Everybody, when you get to the basics, wants exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not different. And I don't care which culture you go to, whether you go to Asia or Africa or South America or Europe, people want the best life they can have and the best life for their kids. I mean, they want, good food. They want their kids to have an education. That doesn't vary. And people are almost uniformly hospitable. And in fact, I was having a conversation. I'm writing a second book. I wrote one that's out now, but I'm in the midst of writing a second one, which has already been accepted by the publisher. And which is nice. But I was writing a story about being in Morocco. And I was by myself in Fez and went into the walled city, which is the ancient city.
Ah.
And you get in there and you get turned around within 5 minutes and you could almost never find your way out. But I got in, I went into a store, and I won't go through the whole story, but ultimately I ended up, the shopkeeper said, why don't you take my nephew? He'll guide you through the city, pay him $10 and he'll be your guide for the day. Okay, that seemed like a good deal. Well, the kid was adorable. He was 15 years old. We had this great conversation. And at the end of it, he said, oh, I really want to visit. Well, he said several times, I really want to come to New York. I said, well, if you come to New York, if you get there, here's my contact information, get a hold of me. And I meant it. I was very serious. If he ever shows up, I will show him New York. And I've done it for other people that I've met in other places. And I was with a group of friends, and we were talking about this story. And they said to me, you really gave him your address? Why would you do that? And I go, why wouldn't I? And they were very nervous about it. They were really like, how could you do that? And I was like, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, this is not a bad thing. It's a really good thing. And I think there's still that piece of fear amongst some people. And these are sophisticated people. I was like, why would you think that's a scary thing? I've been invited into more people's homes when I've traveled the world and out to dinner by more people than I can begin to count. People have been uniformly gracious and wonderful, no matter where I've been in the world. Why wouldn't I return that favor?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's different now, and it surprises me that it still exists. I've gotten a little bit off track, but it just really, it's on my mind because I just had the conversation, and it was like, how odd.
I think it's one of those things because, okay, with the amount of traveling you're doing, it's like, okay, look, people, when they often travel, they do the sort of tourist thing. They go to a holiday resort, and basically they like get their drinks, go to the swimming pool, maybe see a site or two, and then basically come back after, say, a week, 10 days, 14 days, and they're done and dusted. Like, they haven't really they're far, far, far from ever breaking that sort of realm of comfort they're in. So they're
Right.
okay. So they exist in that moment and go, yes, I had a great time. I relaxed. I got to see a site. And yeah, we sat by the pool and we drank Mai Tais or whatever they might be doing. But what you're doing is, yeah, you are traveling, but you are traveling. You're getting into the nitty-gritty. You are sort of pushing the sort of realm of what the boundaries of your comfort might be sometimes. And I think that's where the sort of different perspective comes from for you and compared to your friends, your colleagues, your peers. And I think that's one of the things which I think could really throw some of them off. I could be wrong in saying that. You tell me,
No, I think that's true. I mean, the kind of travel I do is not your typical travel.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when I was promoting the book, people kept saying to me, asking me for tips. And I had to laugh because I got into 2 magazines as being the top tip for travelers for 2022. And my tip was go out and meet people and talk to them. And I'm thinking, That's really the top tip, but it is because people stay within very narrow boundaries. So you get to see the place, but you don't get to know the place at all because you're not interacting with people. And to me, that's the most fun of traveling. I love seeing new sites. I love going to museums and concerts and seeing the scenery and all the rest of it. But the best part of it is always meeting people, always.
Yeah. What do you say, like, with regards to you sort of getting into the realms of traveling and everything like this? When you were a kid in New York, like before you like got turfed out because, hey, baby boomer times and everything like this, would you say it changed how did it change your perspective? Because you live in one of the most cosmopolitan cities at that time. Like there are more sort of races of people in that place.
Absolutely.
Different languages, foods, everything like this. It's like where New York is where a lot of cities have followed in that sort of perspective. How did that change for you?
It's really interesting. I'm going to go back to my childhood for a minute.
Yeah.
My mother always wanted to travel, but for lots of reasons never could. And so we traveled in New York City. That's the best way I can describe it. My father was not interested. My brothers were not interested. She had a daughter. She was taking me. And we went to all the museums, and I got fascinated by them. Museum of Natural History has this enormous ethnographic collection, always has. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. And we would go to every foreign restaurant she could find. I keep joking that I'm the only kid in New York, probably the only kid in the States, that at 7 years old was proficient with chopsticks and loved sushi. And this is in the 50s. So it was very unusual.
Yeah, in the 50s, how many people knew what sushi was?
Exactly.
Exactly.
But my mother was, we tried everything. So, and if a performance came in, a dance performance, from Russia or there used to be this, what do they call him? Anyhow, he would bring impresario. He would bring in shows from all over the world. They were here, we went. And I got really fascinated and I wanted to see it for myself. I mean, where it came from. And so I grew up with a very cosmopolitan, very, very international cosmopolitan outlook. And so for me, it was going to see places and things that I already had a little bit of familiarity with. Not very much, but just enough that I could relate to it before I even got there. Of course, I always had lots of surprises because things that I thought, and then I get there and go, oh, no, that's not quite right. In fact, I'm not even close to being right. But at least I had a feeling of comfort before I went. And so for me, it was, and then I just got more and more and more adventurous is the truth of it. I wanted to see if, I would hear about places and I go, whoa, I got to go there. That sounds really great. Ooh, got to go there. And then when I said, I have all these degrees in ceramics, and then I realized that it was never going to pay for my real love in life, which is traveling. And so I had to find a job that was going to pay enough that I could travel. And even more, what would be even better is if I could find a job where they paid me to travel. And I ended up working in marketing. And in fact, I became a consultant, went out on my own, and my clients were sending me all over the globe constantly. For about 25 years, I was doing international work. And, I joke about it. I went down to Australia 2019 because my nephew was down there for a year with his family. And so I said, yeah, I'm going to Australia. Oh, you'll love it. You'll love it. And I said, yeah, I've been there before. Oh, well, when have you been there? Well, this is going to be my 8th trip. And they would look at me and go, this is going to be your 8th trip to Australia? I was like, yeah. And because I was a solo practitioner as a consultant, I could just, say to people, I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks, and the work would only take a week. And then I would take a week to travel around. And of course, the flight was on them. So it was pretty cheap to do it. So I got to see a lot of Australia.
Yeah, because this is the thing. Australia and New Zealand for most people around the world is like one of the hardest two of the hardest countries to do, because like by the time you've flown out there and then basically land, you can't do it in a week. You can't do it in 2. You need a healthy chunk of time. But to like go, okay, yeah, out of the box thinking like, okay, how can I get others to pay for my passion, for my hobby? Like, I've got to ask this, wait, before I go down that. Did you ever sign up to air miles? And for the love of God, if you did, how many air miles did you have at one point?
Well, so here's an interesting one. I had a job in the 80s.
Yeah.
And my boss, I was working for an air freight company. And my boss came over from American Airlines. And he had been the executive vice president of marketing at American Airlines. And they were the ones who they came out with Advantage Miles. They were the first airline to do it. And he was the one that created the program. So he said to me, you got to join this. And I'm going, well, what does it cost? I mean, I had no idea what it was. I have an incredibly low number on American Airlines. I am platinum for life, which is not their highest because they keep changing the tiers. To be platinum for life, you had to have flown 2 million miles. And I became platinum for life sometime in the 90s. And I've flown a lot since then. So lots and lots of miles. And that's just American.
Platinum for, okay.
I don't have it anymore, but I had elite status on Northwest Airlines and on Delta.
Oh, that's amazing.
I've flown a lot.
Well, yeah, like 2 million miles. That was in the 90s. Oh my God! Wow, you really did do a lot of work all over the place. Wow.
Yeah.
Good God. So, dare I ask what platinum gets you for life?
Well, it used to get you a lot more than it gets you now. But what it gets you is you never pay for luggage, no matter how much you carry on it. I mean, how much you bring with you, although I always do carry on, so that's irrelevant. You get upgraded seats, always. Not to first class or business class, but they have Comfort Plus and all this stuff. And you always get that. They will, if they can, upgrade you either to business or first, if they have room for you. You always get to board first. So.
Yeah. Okay. My God. Very nice. Very nice. So I am curious. Now, this is the thing. You have covered a large sort of realm of time when it comes, but you don't look it. No.
Thank you.
There you go. Yeah. When would you say was like, not the golden age, but that sweet spot of time where it was like, yeah, it was almost perfect, or it was like, yeah, this was like a real great era of travel?
The 90s. And I'll tell you why. For me, not for everybody, but for me. I had the ability to make my own schedule. Mm-hmm. So I could go whenever I wanted, wherever I wanted. I was on my own. Prior to that, I was in a partnership or I was in a job where, there were limitations. And I took about 10 weeks vacation a year once I was on my own. Not altogether, and I had the money to be able to pay for things and to not have to stay in youth hostels. And if I wanted to go, to something, I could afford to do it. Not that I was doing it's funny because some people will buy diamonds and cars. I buy travel. That's what I care about. And so I was able to do what I wanted, and I was in, great health, didn't have any issues at all. So I never felt even remotely concerned about my health when I was traveling anywhere. And so for me, and the world was pretty quiet. It was pre 9/11 and all the security requirements. You could just get on a plane, and you didn't have to worry about all the crazy regulations to get through security. It was much simpler. So yeah, I would say the 90s.
Yeah, the 90s. Like, when did I go to America first time? I went to a summer camp in Virginia, called Camp High Road, Christian camp. And I've got to say, when I was leaving America, like, I had a ex-army surplus backpack, and it was like bulky, unusual shape, and like they must have got this new sort of shrink wrap machine in, and they saw me like, oh, you. They were very excited and enthusiastic, and they just basically shrink wrapped my whole backpack. So it was like, yeah. When I got to Heathrow on the other side, they just looked at my bag. They looked at me and looked at my bag, or off you go. So I was like, okay, is that right? Yeah, like I do have, the 90s was the sort of first time I sort of traveled around. And like, I do remember the world where there wasn't 9/11 and there wasn't the whole security checks. And it just seemed like, it just flowed that little bit more simply.
Yeah, it was much easier. Now between all the security and well, certainly with COVID, it's just become very difficult.
Yeah.
And it didn't used to be. It really, it was. I can remember when that very first trip when I flew to the Netherlands, my whole family came to the gate with me. When was the last time anybody came to a gate with you to see you off?
No, like, put it this way, no, like not in the 90s. You may wait.
No,
no, I don't think. Wait, you may have no, not in the UK. I'm just trying to think, because I did travel like a couple of times when I was a kid in the 80s, and I don't think you could do that over here. It was like, you got to the point and it was like, okay, you got to stop here. But, going to the gate.
Yeah. Yep. So, but anyhow, if that would be, and I did a lot of traveling in the 90s, a lot of traveling, including some fairly unusual, and even in the 80s, I did a lot of unusual traveling. I climbed Kilimanjaro, and let's see, what else did I do? I spent time in Alaska, backpacking, which was interesting, during June at the time of the midnight sun. And, they say that you can go sun crazy. And I was with a group and we were in tents. And of course, it never got dark. And I don't care, I had the eye shades. It didn't make any difference. It was like I was awake. And you start getting crazy because you don't sleep at all. It's an interesting experience, to say the least.
Because you said, in my research, you've been to every single state in the United States.
Yes.
Which is one of those things where, as much as people live in America, I don't know, there must be a few, but not that many, who can actually have that as a claim to fame. But to go to Alaska to get a little bit sun crazy.
Well, that was not why I went there, but I did get sun crazy.
I'm just saying, So what kicked off the sort of backpack trip to Alaska? Because it's like, it's not wild, go, let's go to Alaska. Well, that's me. But what?
I've never been there.
Yeah.
I really wanted to see, the wildlife is incredible. I wanted to see really unspoiled country. Just absolutely wild. And it still is, but absolutely wild countryside. I wanted to see Denali National Park, which is exquisite. And I got to see bears and all of this stuff. I wanted to go the fjords in Alaska. I took the state ferry, which goes from Alaska down to Seattle. And it was incredible. I mean, it's some of the most gorgeous scenery you could ever imagine. And I got to go on a glacier and walk on a glacier, which was amazing. And when I was on the ferry and you're coming down the coast, they talk about it calving. And so you see these massive chunks of ice drop down and the water splashes 30, 40, 50 feet in the air. And it's quite a sight. And it sounds like a cannon booming. I mean, the noise is unbelievable. And it's just, and you're on the water and you see all of these, seals and dolphins. I mean, it's just, the wildlife is incredible. I got to speak to a lot of people who were at that point living in Alaska. I thought they were insane. They would talk about the fact that in the winter, in the summer, it's light all the time. In the winter, it's dark all the time. And I said, so what do you do? It's like, sleep a lot. I was like, how much can you sleep? It's like, and I was like, no.
But, yeah, no, because Alaska to me, I just like, okay, what's that rustling noise? I hope it's a raccoon. Nothing bigger, please. No, nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was a fun trip. It was a fun trip. I haven't been back there since, so I might have to go back, but see how it's changed, which I'm always afraid to do. Places that I went to when I was, relatively young that were absolutely gorgeous and unspoiled. And I go there now and I go, oh no, what have you done? And there's a few of those that I have gone back to, and I'm really sorry I went back to. So.
Yeah, because this is the thing, okay, when you traveled, when you first started, put on those travel boots and got the travel bug. Now, the world was definitely a much more different place. Okay, you're okay, you were definitely getting something which was much more authentic to what that place was. You're just getting that sort of snippet of time. Now, basically, when you go, the 90s was that time which was ideal for travel. In the sort of early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, over here for sure, that's when you finished your school and then you have a gap here and people would travel around the world. My lady who's in the living room at this moment in time, yeah, she did that very thing. And she goes, Thailand was her favorite place to go and she loved it out there. And trust me, if I ever thought to buy one bit, I will find myself on a plane, going, why am I in Thailand right now? No, I don't want this to happen. But there was this sort of huge explosion of people traveling all around the world from this country, and it's a knock-on effect. So every other country's done it. But to see what you've seen at that sort of period of time, to know what that world was to this world, has the sort of trend, obviously there's some places which you oh, it's ruined it, but has it improved it in other places, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In some places, things are way better, and way better in the sense, not necessarily for tourists, but for the locals, where there was vast poverty and now there isn't. Or towns that I went to at one point that had no running water and didn't have electricity, now have a far better standard of life. And so that's great. But there are so many places that are over tourist that you just go, oh my God. I mean, my biggest example is Bali. I went to Bali. I've been in Bali several times. And the first time I went, it was this lovely, sleepy, laid back place. I mean, it already had tourists, but it was not craziness.
Okay.
The second time I went back, the Aussies had discovered that this was the place to go holiday. And they would come in and just drink themselves silly and behave like boors. That's the only way to describe it. They were awful. And I liked the Aussies, but this was not a pretty picture. And I got very far away from the main tourist areas because they were bad. They were just bad. And then the third time I went, there had been, oh, and I might add, the second time I went, there had been, I don't know if you remember, there was that enormous tsunami that hit. Well, I was in Bali. Well, actually, I was in Lombok, which is the next island going east, which was 1,000 miles from where the tsunami hit. But I was on Lombok, and there was no Wi-Fi, there was nothing. I had no idea what was going on. And I came back to Bali, and Bali, everybody was out there collecting money for the victims, and it was everywhere. And I managed to get on the internet, and I must have had 50 emails from people saying, "Are you okay? We haven't heard from you." And apparently I went on to the US State Department list of missing people. And, it was, yeah. So I had to let everybody know, I'm fine. I just didn't know what had happened. But Bali had turned into just like a crazy place. And I was only there for a couple of days on my way out because you couldn't get an international flight out of Lombok. And I vowed I would never go back because it's just overrun.
My God. Yeah, because 2004, I remember seeing pictures of that. It was 2004. Yeah. Where yes, my boss at the time, he was going to fly out there, and it all hit, and you're just like, oh my God, no, because it was one of those things where you kind of okay, a tsunami. If the film Deep Impact.
Yeah.
Okay, they talked about a tsunami then, but you know what I mean? It's one of those things where you hear it, you watch it, and you go, okay. And that goes into the furthest regions of your mind. Now, when it's okay, yeah, everyone they show pictures of people on the beach, going, oh, that's unusual. The water's gone out. I was like, okay, now everyone will be like, oh no, it's time to go. But
yeah, oh yeah.
Then it was like, oh no. It's quite tragic, really. But you know what? Thankfully, you weren't there because,
no,
Jesus.
No, I wasn't. I was not there. As I say, I was 1,000 miles away.
Yeah.
Indonesia is a very long, narrow country with this string of islands, and I was all the way east, and that was all the way west. So I was very far from it. But it was. But anyhow, the point being that Bali has turned into something that I would not go back to.
Yeah, no, I see. I'm this is the thing. I'm curious. You've done you've got yourself a book, and you've got a second book coming. Okay. Now, have you ever thought about putting your sort of journeys out on the interweb, on the YouTube channel or anything like that?
I thought about it, but haven't done it. I love to write. I'm really a writer at heart. And for me, it's just the easiest way to do it. And people have said, oh, do an audiobook. Maybe. It's expensive to do it. It's very expensive to do an audiobook.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to get it done professionally, which you pretty much have to.
Yeah.
And if you then want to get it into all the the channels, onto Amazon, and into all of the places that you can buy an audiobook. And it's very expensive to do that. The book publishing was not, because I was accepted by a publisher, but the audiobook I would have to pay for, and it's not cheap.
Oh, for just ballpark numbers, how much, say if you've got a 5-hour book, how much would it say cost?
I don't know the exact numbers, and it really depends if you do it or if you get someone else to do it, to read it. Everybody says I should read it, but, that I should be reading my own book. But I'm not experienced in that, so it will take longer. And my guess is if you do it for under $2,000, that would be a huge bargain if I did the reading.
Yeah.
And if you start bringing in someone else, it starts to get to $3,000, $4,000, $5,000.
Wow. Now this,
Yeah.
yeah, like this is the thing. I'm a person who's listened to an audio book or two in my lifetime, and I do have to say, if the author of the book is actually reading it, it gives it an extra sort of quality to it. It comes a little bit more alive. I have listened to books where, like, yeah, they've got someone who's a professional doing it, and it's all right. And like, it comes down to how good that person is. It can be like, or it's like, it's okay. But when the author's doing it, I don't know, they just they're capturing the essence a lot more, if you get what I mean.
Well, it's my story.
Yeah.
So I'm reading my story and with my words. So I know I know how it sounds in my head, and somebody else reading it is going to read it very differently.
So with the first book, what inspired you to actually like go, you know what, I'm going to do a book. I have this book in me. Here it comes.
I started writing stories, and I joined a writing group, and I was writing stories and writing more, and everybody loved them, and said, you have got to make a book out of this. And then I struggled for about a year trying to figure out how to make a book out of all these stories and have it make any kind of sense. And once I finally figured that out, it took a long time until I found a publisher, and it's a long, involved process. But I did, and but it really was just writing the stories down, and I kind of was writing them for me, but I was in a writing group, and they said, I had a lot of encouragement from the people in the group.
So did you write it as a collection of short stories and then put it together? Okay.
Yeah. And they are. I mean, you could read each one individually. People have said to me, oh yeah, like, I read these because these are the ones where I've been, so I wanted to see what your impressions were. And then I read those because those are places I want to go. And then I skipped back and I read other ones just because now I was really hooked, as opposed to, reading it front cover to back cover.
Yeah, I hear you. Like, this is the thing. Like, that sounds like something which can be broken down into like a nice little TV series of a number of things. Methinks you should give Netflix a little call. Yeah, does I get that?
Want to call on my behalf?
Hey, my percentages are rather reasonable. Like 10. No, 15%.
You sell it, you got it.
Yeah, because like, this is the thing. I think one of the things where people travel, like, they sometimes don't, they either, how can I put it? They sort of get caught up in the romance of the time, and they don't okay. Yeah, they don't sort of remember the sort of, okay, I was here, but it was, not the best, or I needed to do this. Like, they don't sort of do the whole warts and all, if you get what I mean.
Right.
And would you?
Well, I should also tell you, and I go back to my mother, to whom the book is dedicated, for you will understand why.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, already you get it, because I was in New York. She was getting me prepared for this. She had me writing a travel journal from the time I was very young. I have a travel journal from when I was, I think, 7 or 8 years old, and we went to Florida to visit my grandmother, and with drawings, and I still have it. And she really got me into the habit of doing it every time I traveled, no matter where I went. And I really kept it up. And I would handwrite them for years and years. And then professionally, when I was working, I had a transcriptionist, somebody who worked for me. And so when she wasn't busy, I would take my handwritten journals and read them, record them, and have her type them for me. So I have every journal I have ever written on my computer. So I have incredible source material for all of this stuff. I can pull out details that are amazing. And I also have thousands and thousands and thousands of photographs. I mean, I don't know if you looked on my website, but if you did, there's an area that has photographs from every single chapter of the book. So you can see where I've been and what it looked like. And they're fun. And they're all on my website, which is KarenGershowitz.com. So easy.
My God, like this is the thing. I'm beginning to think your mother inceptioned you into like the whole travel. Like she's like, okay, look, I'm not going to be able to get out there and travel myself. I've got. Like, it's like, okay, which one of my kids can I do it to? Oh, there you go. Karen seems to be interested. There you go. It's like,
yeah, pretty much. I mean, she really did inspire me, no question about it. And so I. And the truth is I love it. You can tell if you haven't figured out by now, it is a true passion.
No, I didn't really pick that up.
Didn't pick that up, huh?
You know, I was just like, like no, nothing really sort of indicated that to me. Like, platinum like membership for life. Like, traveling over 2 million miles, like up in the 90s. Like selecting, like doing jobs to get you to travel, and like going to Australia 8 times. No, like you know what I mean. Coming over to the UK, living some bohemian lifestyle. I can only imagine what type of mischief you got up to in this fair, like in London, that fair city back in the 60s, late 70s, early 70s. No.
In the 70s.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, I can understand why your dad might have been like, maybe not. I need to keep an eye on him, but yeah.
So I have to, just because that's the book.
Yes, Travel Mania.
There it is. Travel Mania: Stories of Wanderlust. So it is fun, and it is an ebook.
Perfect. Yeah. Like this is the thing now. With like all your traveling you've done, all the pictures you've taken, the transcriptions, and like basically the first book, the second book, which is going to be coming on its way. And like, I am like, what else are you doing? Because look, it sounds like, okay, you've been ultra lazy and like, pathetic. But is there anything else you might be putting on to like getting your fingers into as well?
Oh God, yeah.
Oh.
I was a business consultant. For marketing and strategy for marketing, and I still have a couple of clients. And I work with an organization in New York, although it's a national organization called SCORE, and we mentor entrepreneurs. And so I spend a lot of my time giving webinars about marketing and consulting, and mentoring people one-on-one to help them be successful in business. So that's another whole area that I spend a lot of time on. I organize food drives. We just had one yesterday. I keep myself very busy.
Yeah.
Someone joked about, retired and what you do have no resemblance to each other. And I said, yeah, pretty much. Of course, I travel. And now that the world is opening up again, I have 4 trips planned over the next, few months. And I'm ready. I am so ready to go. And while I was, while COVID was, the absolute peak, I decided I was going to explore New York, despite the fact that I am a lifelong New Yorker. There are a zillion places. I mean, it's a big city with a lot of things in it. And very unusually, I have a car in New York, which most people don't, but I do own a car.
Okay.
And so, I would take drives, 25 miles, go out of the city, just in different places, going to parks and going to places that you could just see the city from a different angle. And then I got into street art. I really got into street art. And so I would search on the internet for all these places where there was street art and go explore. And incredible. I mean, there really is incredible street art out there. People are so talented and the stuff they do is so much fun. There's one area in Brooklyn that it still is a very industrial area. And it's a horrible story, but this guy's father got killed. Somebody mugged him as he was coming out of the building that he owned working. And the son wanted to do something to commemorate and memorialize his father.
Yeah.
So he got a friend who was a very talented painter to paint one entire wall of the building with I think a portrait of his father.
Oh.
And people got fascinated by it. And they said, well, could we paint on some of the other walls? People started to come to him. Sure. And then other building owners in the area said, gee, that's really cool. Anyhow, there's now blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks of some of the most astounding art you can imagine. It's fabulous. And there's another neighborhood in Queens that same thing. I mean, different story about how it got started, but it's an enormous area. The Lower East Side in Manhattan. And if you go up to the Bronx and if you go out into New Jersey, it's everywhere. Once you start looking for it, it's everywhere. And people are astoundingly talented. And the stuff is just great fun. Great fun. So that was one of the things I did during COVID was I just kept finding these neighborhoods and going around and looking at this stuff.
Would you say like the sort of COVID times helped you fall back in love with New York City?
I've always been in love with New York City. Seriously. I mean, except for the period when I first left and I just like, gotta get out of here. It, as you said, kind of at the beginning, it is one of the most diverse, interesting cities where people come together in ways that I don't think happen. I mean, I think it does in London as well, but I think most parts of the world, it does not happen because you've got so many cultures and people feed off of each other and you come up with things in everything, in food, in art, in music, you know, in business. It's just this amalgam of lots and lots of different ways of thinking, which to me is how things move forward. You know, it's not going straight down the same path. It's when there's lots of cross-fertilization between people and cultures. And New York, and that's what New York is and has been since I'm a kid. So, you know, so for that, I love it.
Wow. Yes, basically there is, I don't know if they still use the term that much, but the term nylon, basically for New York and London, because they kind of see them as sister cities. The only reason why like New York is not the capital city of the United States is because of a turncoat traitor named Washington.
Yeah, well.
But you know, that's another story.
Right. But I mean, frankly, I'm glad the government isn't here. But it's just another layer of craziness. But it's you know, it's a really vibrant city. I mean, it just, you know, I mean, we've got our problems. God knows we have our problems. You know, I mean, there are times when the city is so dirty that you just go, oh my God. And there are times when, you know, the subways are not working the way they should. Or, you know, there's a real housing and homelessness problem at the moment, which hopefully our new mayor will help with. Our last mayor was horrible. We have a good mayor. I think we have a good mayor now.
Was that de Blasio?
No, de Blasio.
De Blasio, yeah.
Blasio, yeah. Now we have Eric Adams.
Okay.
And we're hoping. Everybody's got fingers crossed that it'll help. You know, but at the moment, you know, there's a lot of, we've got our problems. It's still a great city.
Yeah. No, like this is the thing. Anyone, like, doesn't matter where you are in the world. Look, London, like, hey, I love that city. I like no other. But yes, it does have its problems as well. Anyone who goes, from the largest city to the smallest town or village or like, you know what I mean, like backwater place, it will always have its problems. Nowhere is perfect. There is no such place as utopia. And like, yeah, like, but if there was, I wouldn't want to live there because you know what?
All right.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. Like the sort of, how can I say, the sort of things what sometimes may come across as ugly is the thing what actually gives that city its characters, be its pulse. because like from that story you told about, yeah, that poor chap who lost his father being mugged, it then like spawned out of that something remarkable, something special, something to lead to that area, which then went to another area, and yeah, and give that whole part of the city a new character, a new lease of life, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And, I mean, what always makes me sort of laugh is, if you were to watch the news, you'd think that the second you step out of your door, you're going to get killed. and the reality, that's so far from reality. And I said, it is, if you really think about it, there are more people, more nationalities, I think, in New York than in any other city on the globe. And I'm pretty sure.
I would like put it this way, I would say London, like, well,
in any event, there's a lot of
well, we like, this is the whole thing. I'm protecting my city. You protect. It's like,
but in any event, it's almost a thing. But if you hear about, there's a conflict between nationalities, if they make this huge thing about it, and I'm going, there was one conflict on one day, and the rest of the time we have 9 million or close to 10 million people, and nothing else has gone on. And everybody's getting along.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody ever says that. No. You get on a subway and, you're going to see people from, sometimes I sit there and go, and I'll listen to languages because people are speaking and, and it's like, do I even recognize what language that is? And sometimes I can't. I can't place what language it is. I was like, or you try and look and go, okay, so what nationality is that person? And I can't guess because it's such a mashup of people.
And that's a beautiful thing. And you know what? Like, I really wish there was more places like that in the world, like where you can have that mix, have that sort of opportunity to learn from other cultures in one place, like living in, like, not so much melting pot, but yeah, having the opportunity to connect and like help people grow on a greater level. But like, yeah, with New York City being what it is and everything like this, like, one of the things what always makes me laugh, because like you'll watch the news or something like this and they'll like go, the world is burning, the world is burning. You look outside and like, yeah, you see birds and like everything's peaceful and serene, and you look at the news and it's like, yeah, nah, it's a crazy thing, but like, yeah, got to say,
yes, it's you got to take it all with a grain of salt and just use your own eyes and sift out a lot of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I remember when I first got to New York City and like they went, yeah, whatever you do, don't look up because tourists always look up. And like, this is the thing, I stepped out of Grand Central Station and it was just like,
yeah.
I was just like, oh my God. Like, because when you see the New York skyline, you're like, oh, that's amazing. I've seen it on TV, I've seen it on films. Like, look, like my first New York skyline, yeah, I had the like Twin Towers there. It was like, yeah.
Right.
So it was like, yeah, I've seen it all. But when I stepped out into New York City properly, I was like, oh my God. It's really weird because it's like, it's big and spacious, but it's also sometimes very sort of claustrophobic at the same time. And it threw me for like a good like half a day before I was like, okay,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I live in Manhattan, but where I live, I'm very close to Central Park and Riverside Park, both of which are very large parks.
Yeah.
And where I live, I'm in a complex of 9 buildings, and we have this huge grassy area with trees and our own private park there. and it's like, whoa, people come and they're always amazed. They don't think of this, and it's quiet because I face into a courtyard, but I get a lot of light, and people are always astounded. It's like, it doesn't feel like this is Manhattan. It's like, yeah.
Like, wait, it sounds like you live in a similar place. There's a Disney Plus series called Murder in the Building. Oh God, who does it? Oh, why am I? Why am I blanking on the community's name? Steve Martin. Oh God. What's it?
I don't know.
No, basically they're in this like apartment where they get together and they create this podcast. There's him, Zoe Saldana, like I might be getting that wrong, but they are in this building and like there's a murder what takes place and they trying to solve this like murder, but like the building itself is it's kind of similar to how you described it. Like it's a big white building and it's got its own courtyard. I don't know if it's got its own park, but yeah, it's like, yeah, I was like quite fascinated places like that exist in.
There's quite a few of them.
Yeah.
And the interesting piece is people also think that it is, I live in it, you know, they're ordinary people. This is not ultra luxury. It just happens to have this. And it's it's very unusual. Most people, you know, you're right on the street and you hear all the traffic and, you know, you are in the middle of a city.
Yeah.
And I'm in the middle of the city and I don't hear it. I mean, you can hear, haven't heard anything in terms of sirens or anything else because there just haven't been any.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now I have to ask now, being such a traveled person of the world, now you have most probably come across a number of different cuisines you may have had at some point or the other. Now, which was your favorite dish and which was your most unusual dish to say?
My favorite dish,
Mm-hmm.
and this one I'm torn between two.
Okay.
First one was in Vietnam. I love Vietnamese food, absolutely love it. And we had read about this restaurant in Saigon. And I was traveling with a friend and we went into the restaurant and we're looking at the menu and everything looks wonderful. And the prices are so inexpensive. They're silly. I mean, like a dish was 35 cents and we're in an elegant restaurant, 50 cents. So we're ordering like there's no tomorrow. So we'll just taste that. We'll just taste that. The food came out and they must have thought we were insane. And we could not possibly have eaten all this food, but we were going to taste everything. It was one of the best meals I've ever had in my life. I mean, it was just everything, I swear, was either growing or swimming or walking that day. And it was unbelievable. And the spices and the presentation, it was a phenomenal meal. The worst meal I've ever had was in Tanzania. And we were camping.
Yeah.
And we had just come back from a sunset drive to go see animals. And we get back into the camp and we're in the middle of the Serengeti. And we hear this shriek. I mean, literally a shriek. And it's the tour guide. And we all come running out. What's the matter? What's the matter? No, just go back. Just go back. Anyhow, the chef, who was Tanzanian,
Yeah.
and for him, Western food was as strange to him as Tanzanian food was to us, had taken what was supposed to be an appetizer, an entree, and dessert, and put it all in one bowl. So we had this bowl of some kind of grain with Vienna sausage, and then I forget what else was in there, but a whole bunch of stuff with a can of fruit over it, and on top of that was poured like whipping cream, or just condensed milk, but sweet condensed milk, and then he made a little design with sardines. It was all in one bowl. And he thought he was presenting us with the most beautiful dish ever. And it looked gorgeous until you realized what was in the bowl. And we all went, oh no. And of course, they didn't have enough food because we're out in the middle of nowhere for him to make another meal. So we're literally pulling things out, drying them off, cleaning them up, and eating things individually. It was horrible. Worst meal I've ever had.
Like, you know what episode of Friends where, like, yeah, I think Rachel like screws up cooking this dish. She had like cooks shepherd's pie and treacle, like a trifle together,
right?
and
well, kind of like that.
Yeah. Oh God. Condensed milk. Oh, no.
It was bad.
Oh,
it was really bad. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, that was, and then I mean, I've had other fabulous meals all over the world. I mean, really fabulous meals. But yeah, but that was memorable for all the wrong reasons. But it makes a great story. You know, I mean, some of the biggest screw ups when you're traveling make for the best stories.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
You know, the things that go wrong are sometimes as much fun or more fun than the things that go right.
Yeah. I have to ask, like, with all your travels around the world, like, did you ever have like some comrades in arms, like your traveling like bug, join you?
Yeah, well, quite often. I mean, I'm the person that people call, they want to go somewhere and they'll call me up and go, do you want to go too? And it's like, and my usual question is when, you know? And, you know, I'll pick up and go almost anywhere. And if it's somebody who I travel well with, I mean, some people I'm friends with and I will not travel with. Just, you know, being friends with people and traveling with them don't necessarily, you know, they're not necessarily good travel companions. I need people who are very adventurous. I need people who don't need to have a plan. You know, if they have it, I traveled once with someone who I will not name, who, just in case she ever hears this, who had everything, you know, we were going to do this morning, and then at noon we were going to do this, in the afternoon we were going to do this, and then we were going to do this, and God forbid something went wrong, you know, she was beside herself. And I just wanted to go hang out and what people watch at a cafe.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to have the same travel style.
Yeah, I like one of the things I don't get when like someone is got this like whole structure like that. How on earth they ever have the opportunity to relax when they're on holiday? Like it's like okay, because like yeah. Plus, if it's a large group, you can't do it because everyone's on a sort of they're on their own agenda, no matter what you like want to say or do.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's like, no, that does not work for me. Sorry. But anyhow, but yes, I have traveled with many other people over the years, you know, and of various kinds and different people. And yeah, I like traveling. I mean, there are benefits to both traveling with someone and traveling by yourself. When you travel by yourself, you get to meet more locals, because if somebody sees you alone, they're much more likely to come up to you. They won't interrupt you if you're with someone else. But when you're with someone else, you always have someone to eat with, and you always have, oh, I just saw the greatest thing, let me tell you about it, you know, or, oh, come over and look at this. So yeah, you know, I absolutely will do both.
Yeah, I hear you, because like, yeah, because that sort of traveling with companionship, that's great. Then, but if you're traveling solo, you just find those other places where you would not normally go. Love it.
Yeah.
You are a brave soul indeed, my lady. You're a brave soul indeed. No, like this thing, like it takes some real guts to, like, you know what I mean, go out there and travel by like oneself. Because look, like when you started, like the world was very much a different place. Like, yeah, like it's not going a lady by herself, but it's like, yeah, you're going to some parts of the world where, okay, you are a stranger to that area. Like, yes, you don't know the language, and tourists were not a thing back then. As time went on, like changed, and like tourism became a little bit more of a thing, and you can go, oh, it got a little bit safer, but if you still ventured into places where there wasn't that many tourists. So it's like, yeah. So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're still kind of sailing, like, yeah, on that sort of edgy side of things. Now in this day and age, is there any places which you would say are edgy with which you're not on, like, yeah, on some like country list of not to travel because it's not safe? Because, you know,
Yeah, I mean, I want to go. I was supposed to go for my last birthday, which did not work out because of COVID, to the South Pacific. And I don't mean going to Tahiti. I want to go to some of the more remote islands, the Cook Islands and, you know, Samoa, and really get into the islands that are in the Pacific, and which are not as touristy. And I'm very curious about them because I've never been there. So that's one area I definitely want to go to. I also, you know, I have a fairly, my list never gets shorter. That's the thing about it. My list never gets shorter. You know, so, and there are a few places I'd love to go back to. And some things that are, you know, like these must-see sites that I've never seen. I was supposed to go in April of 2020 to go see the Tulip Festival in the Netherlands. Well, needless to say, that didn't happen. April of 2020, no one was going anywhere. So this year in April, it turns out, and who knew, that in the state of Washington, there's an area called the Skagit Valley, and they have a tulip festival that is supposed to rival the Netherlands. And so I am going there to go see the tulips. And apparently it literally rivals Keukenhof, which is the big gardens that are in Amsterdam. So we'll see. You know, it's like, okay, so what can I do that I feel safe doing and where I don't think I'm going to run into trouble?
Yeah.
That I can do now. And I've also got some international trips that I'm beginning to plan. So I'm gonna, for the first time in over 2 years. In fact, I was in London visiting friends. I came back on March 16th of 2020, which was the last day that normal flights were coming in.
Yeah. No, like basically, like I'm a football fan and Liverpool's my team. And like, okay, that week, okay, the news reports were coming in, and on the Monday, the 13th, I was meant to go to Liverpool to watch them play at Goodison, basically Everton, their like local rival. And like my friend was like, "Oh yeah, I got cheap tickets, train tickets to get up there." I was like sitting there like, "Oh no, we're gonna have to wait until the actual day. I don't think this is gonna like work out the way I think it is." That weekend, it was like, yeah, no, it's closed. You were very lucky to get out because they're really...
And I wasn't supposed to. Well, you said before, you know, so what does platinum get you? Well, I was flying back on American, and I was supposed to be coming on the 17th. And I kept hearing that if you called any of the airlines, you were being put on hold for 4, 5, 6 hours. And you have a special number when you're platinum. Oh. So I called the special number and got through immediately. I mean, I think I was on hold for 2 minutes, and they got me onto a flight. My God,
I must get this platinum card.
You just have to fly 2 million miles. That's all.
Yeah, like this is the thing. I don't know if I've got 2 million miles in me. It's like I don't think I've got the funds to actually do that right now.
Well, that's why I said I had somebody else paying for it.
Yeah, wow. There you go. I need someone else. If there's any wealthy benefactors out there who can actually pay for me to travel around the world, like just going on flights left, right, and center until I get to 2 million, please get in contact with me. I'm not too sure that's going to work out, but that's another story.
A nice thought.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I am curious, like before like we go, like what are your sort of like plans for the next, say, couple of years, say, because travel is part of it, books part of it. Is there anything else?
Ever happens, I don't know. We'll just wait and see. But definitely travel, definitely the book, definitely continue with the mentoring and the workshops that I do. And we'll see. You know, I am open to whatever opportunities come my way, because who knows?
Excellent, excellent. Now, I have to say, our time has come to an end. I'm sorry to say, but yeah, you have been wonderful, Karen.
Great fun.
Hey, can you let the lovely people know how they can get hold of you, how they can find you out there on these webs?
Well, they can go to my website, which is KarenGershowitz.com, which is pretty straightforward. And there's a contact me button on it, and I will respond. And by all means, do go onto the website. It's got great stories, and I do a blog on there. And look at the photos. There's lots of them. And by all means, read the book. The book's great. It really is. I mean, it's a fun book. And I will say that one of my friends in London, actually, he's not in London, he's in Hull, bought the book, wanted a real book as opposed to an ebook, and it took a long time to get flown over, or I think it swam over. But an ebook you could get immediately, and it is definitely an ebook. So, and it is fun. People think it's a great book. So,
hey,
Travel Mania.
Hey,
Travel Mania. Stories of Wanderlust.
Oh, got to love it. Got to love it. Yes. What I'll do, my friends, my life warriors, I will put all of the information into the show notes, the description, so you can find Karen here. Please buy her book. Share some of the magnificent stories and pictures she's taken over. How can I say, a nice chunk of life. Doing the travel thing, over 2 million miles in the 90s. I love it. Got to love it. I'd like to also say thank you to you, Karen, for this day. You have been wonderful.
Absolutely a pleasure. This was great fun.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Now, what can I say? I will send her a rubber check in the post sometime soon.
Okay.
And I'd like to say thank you to you, my friends, my life warriors, for sticking with us so far up until the end of this show. Please stay safe, stay well, be awesome, be excellent, be fantastic. Be all the positive beats you can be in this world and then some. Have a great day, guys. Yeah. Peace. And we are...